down the line. When we all talked, no one that I was interviewing, several of you for the first time, was surprised about the idea of making money in print. And so my question to you globally is, why do we need a panel on it?
Well, I think that most media companies have seen traditional print revenues fall dramatically in the last 6 or 7 years. And so, I'm going to move this away a little bit. I think that a lot of us are trying to find ways to reinvent the wheel. And relationships have changed, and technology has changed. And I think one of the problems that we recognize is that advertisers and marketers are looking for something shiny out in the stream. They're like fish, really dumb fish. And if there's something shiny and new, they immediately gravitate towards it. But what's proven and what's tried and true, they tend to avoid. And so I think it's just has to be part of the conversation.
So essentially, we're working on building comfort level in reaching both a new generation, but also a generation that's a group of people that are struggling to figure out how to make good use of print.
Yeah, I would say that's right. Absolutely.
How do you feel?
Well, again, going, I guess, back to the chief revenue officer approach to things, which is, a dollar's a dollar. I think in my world it's kind of unique because while we have a joint venture, Hearst only has an angle into the actual print magazine. So I have several constituencies. We have reader, obviously, first. Then we have our joint venture partner, probably before our advertiser. So I would absolutely agree with what the study shows, which is that we're two separate companies. They don't want someone from HGTV.com and HGTV On Air and HGTV Magazine coming in. So when it comes to relationships, we build that partnership up so that I'm fully comfortable with the website representing our magazine, and they're fully comfortable with me going in, talking about On Air as well. So it's there's a lot of shiny things out there. Our magazine is new enough, and we're going to have that, but then there's another 5-year plan after that. I think it's really all in, are you bringing the multiple of options, but again, centered around that one individual brand.
And Newt, you spoke a lot about relationships in your talk. Is that a core component of what you need to remind people about to make money in this field?
I think it is, because if you don't have a relationship, you're not the only person that's going to be calling on this client. We all have competitors. Some of our competitors are very good. Some of them aren't so good. We don't have all the good ideas, but when you have a relationship with somebody, you usually get a call back if someone else has come in and said, so-and-so can do this. Can you help us? So you want to keep that door open all the time. And the other thing, too, is in terms of the economics of our business right now, it's changed drastically. It's no longer, you're going to get on the plan if you've been on the plan last year and the plan the year before. Everything can be a new day, and it has to be very challenging for the sellers. But the sellers have to step up, too. We can't have sellers in our firm that aren't very, very fluid with internet technology, getting everything out the door when they need it, inexcusable not to meet a deadline. These are things that have just been drilled down in our people, and it's paid off for us.
Now, given the bubble chart that you used a few minutes ago, essentially shows the tremendous range of things that are not print. But what is it that you think creates that compelling argument to make money in print?
I think that, well, the first thing is, I was going to say that if we were sitting at the television innovation center at the University of somewhere, we'd be having exactly the same conversation. This industry is very magazine-centric, and we forget that the television business, the broadcast business, same discussions that we're having here, newspaper business, same discussions by far. In addition, the ad agency business has been killed. Everybody forgets that. They're 50, 60% below where they were 7, 8 years ago. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that I think you have to understand the job to be done on the particular account that you're calling on. And then you have to go in with integration of products and services. And you don't necessarily have to lead with print. We're teaching our people, you can sometimes lead with an exhibit or an event or whatever it is, and then bundle it together. and try to work kind of backwards.
A different question, starting really focused with Fred and Dan. Your magazine launched about 11 years ago. You're only, as you said, 4 years ago. I don't recall exactly, but I think 4 years ago wasn't the best environment for launching a print magazine.
Never feels like it's the best time to launch a print magazine.
So my two questions, I launched the Entertainment Weekly in 1990. That was a big deal. How hard was it starting a print publication, and when you guys kind of like put it to the fore, did anyone recommend therapy?
Well, in 2005, it seemed very easy.
Brilliant.
Brilliant, absolutely, compared to 2009. But, I think that there was obviously an opportunity in the marketplace to come in and deliver long-form journalism, to deliver lifestyle content. And I think that as we see ourselves evolving, we're becoming a content company. We're not probably going to be a magazine publishing company first. I think that the magazine will always be sort of our front step, will be sort of our calling card or the way to get our foot in the door. But I think as we evolve, we are looking at, it's becoming easier and easier to sort of think about how we distribute our content. And so technology is going to change every 2 or 3 years. And so we just have to focus on continuing to put out the most relevant and useful content that we can, and then find ways to adapt to the new technologies that are presenting themselves. So 2005, it was easy. I wonder what we did with all that money back in 2005. So.
And going from 0 to, is it 250,000 newsstand copies?
Yeah.
In 4 years, it's pretty impressive. I can't imagine that was part of the business plan.
It wasn't part of the business plan. We're ahead of the business plan, but what's fascinating to me is if you look back, and I've got this big binder in my office, which says Project BlackBerry, which had nothing to do with mobile technology, but for those of you, Tennessee, Hearst, Scripps is based in Knoxville, and BlackBerry Farm was the first meeting where the Hearst executives met to talk about what this magazine could be. And so while therapy wasn't recommended for me, I was told to have a good financial advisor, because lightning doesn't always strike twice coming after Food Network magazine. And to launch a home magazine, we stay away from the word shelter. I think sort of what I've learned is that a magazine is the tangible manifestation of a brand. And I think we had some challenges when we launched Lifetime with that, and we had no problems at all when we launched Oprah or Food Network with that. So with sort of the HGTV business model, it had to be very clear from the very beginning to pick a positioning. And Hearst is a bit of a fail-fast company. So these days, you don't get 5 to 7 years to sort of build up your readership base and build up your advertising base. And it doesn't work the first year, and you try a new editor. And certainly a JV partner doesn't have patience for that. So from the very beginning, this was going to be inspired by the HGTV brand. But it would not be a tune-in guide by any means, because we wanted to bring in people who maybe, they knew the brand, that would bring them in, but maybe they were looking at something different that was just overall in the world of design and content and your daily life at home. So we marketed ourselves as a home lifestyle magazine. And everybody's a lifestyle magazine, by the way. You're a food lifestyle magazine, because lifestyle helps you get more advertising. But we did want to make sure that we weren't just a designer, trade-focused shelter book. And so we picked that positioning, and there's a lot of wait and see. But I think the decisions we made back then, in a challenging financial year, have really paid off for us along the way, and being consistent all the way across.
Maybe coming back to Jim, something that you said earlier, what does it take to earn ad revenue these days? How do you get on a schedule? I mean, how do you find ways to get in the door and really open up a conversation?
Now you're talking strategically?
Yeah.
I think it's the first thing is to have a reasonably good understanding of what the job to be done is. So when a sales force goes in, it's not about taking someone to lunch. It's about understanding specifically what the problem is that they have to solve. And then coming up with some example solutions, but don't get stuck in them. So you walk in, every presentation we do in our company, we now have a marketing department, and we go in with every time with something. It's very expensive now to do ad sales because you have to go in with something. You can't just show up with a media kit and say, geez, look, let me walk you through my media kit. So you come in with a customized presentation, understanding that they will not go for it, but it gets the conversation going. And I think that's the second way that we do it. And then you start to try to engage in, what is it you're looking for? This is what this specific brand can give, and by what platforms they can give that to them. And then you start working the process, and it takes a month or two, often more sometimes, to really get going, to get on the schedule.
Is that something you guys experience?
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think the biggest thing that has changed, at least in small markets, is that we were trained as salespeople to go in and do the client needs analysis first and find out what the customer's needs were. And then go back in on a second call and present what you think would be the best solutions. Well, selling has changed so much that it's hard enough to get in for that first call. And if you get in for that first call, you are not going to get back in for that second call. And so you really have to go in and understand what the client's needs are, tell the client what their needs are, and look for affirmation, and then present what you think is probably the best solution. But you have to go in with ideas, and they no longer have the time, clients no longer have the time to sit there and go through that client needs analysis with you.
That sounds a little bit like the examples you were showing.
Well, and I also, when I thought about that question, I found an emphasis on the word print. How do you get a print option? Yeah. Because, again, people love the Property Brothers, but I have a lot of advertisers who say, I'm running on HGTV on air. Why would I need a magazine as well? So, the MPA, Magazine Publishers Association, does a lot of good work in showing what engagement does in terms of print. But I think that we've had a lot of success talking about where other marketers are going. And it's fairly incredible when you see a lot of businesses which are based specifically digitally are now turning to print to express their brand. So anyone ever bought anything from Wayfair.com furniture? Wayfair came out with a catalog, a good old-fashioned, very nice catalog. It's almost like a bit of a magazine because not a lot of people knew what Wayfair was other than a place to get furniture. The printed piece does that. We're printed at Quad Graphics, and the CEO was telling me that he produced 50 print catalogs last year for 50 individual e-tailer businesses across home and fashion because they're building great sites, they're buying a lot of search, but they're not getting the traffic that they want because people don't know the differentiation. So they're going to them, they're buying direct mailing lists, and then they're sending it there. So when I go out there and I can actually talk to other manufacturers about this is what other retailers are doing, it creates a lot of interest because a company like Wayfair is so successful. If they're getting into the print game in 2016, maybe I should as well.
Newt?
I was going to say that the thing that I find, and I agree with Jim, you've got to go in there and know what the client needs and wants. We're very fortunate. We're in a very niche business. We know what they want. We know when they need. There's about 600 DMOs, tourism development agencies in the United States. We do business with 450 of them. So we're well known in this marketplace. We come in, we know the industry, we can attack the problem that they need. That's the first step. The second step is to sit there and try to make it be result-driven for them. Because we have a firm belief in everything we do. We do a major program every year with Visit Florida. We run 6 newspaper, there'll be 9 newspaper inserts next year. But if those clients don't get results, there won't be a program in 2018. It's just that simple. So we have to be very careful about where we place it, what we do, and how we present it to the client. Because the traditional trade show that people used to go to, where you'd be in your booth and we'd be walking down the aisle and you go out there and try to grab them to get them in. And when we came up with this idea of a sponsored trade show, I was smiling when you talked about, dealing with a TV partner. I mean, people, when we would call them on the phone, our first marketplace was a faith-based market, and we would call people up and we'd say, we want to invite you to come to a marketplace in Houston, Texas, and we're going to pay your airfare, and they hang up on us. I mean, they literally, we call them back and they say, no, what are you trying to sell? We're not trying to sell anything. We finally got that thing across, but we were like the Jesuits when they went to China. We burned the bridges. There was no, if this didn't succeed, we weren't going back to successful meetings. We weren't going back. We were done. We'd be doing something else for a living. And that's also a great motivator.
All right, one more from Jim.
I was going to just follow up on something that Fred said with a couple of figures. In that study that I've referred to, composite study, the agency world indicated that they will add a new website and/or magazine onto a schedule, sometimes 68%, and often 7%. So pretty daunting. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, once you are denied, the chances of getting back on are almost zero.
Mm-hmm.
That year, I should say. Yeah.
That's why you better have a good client relationship.
Yeah.
I feel better. Newt, if I could stick with you for a second. Both you and Fred represent, smaller circulation titles. Obviously Dan's got a fairly big and robust title. Jim, you work with really a mixture of clients. I mean, some are larger, some are not. But for you two guys to start, I mean, is there an advantage or a disadvantage being as focused as you are?
I've done both.
Yeah.
I've handled Better Homes, Good Housekeeping. We work with Fortune, we work with Forbes, work with some very large, work with Reader's Digest. And I honestly think that where I am today is where I want to be, because you have such a closer relationship with your client. You really, I go out of my way not to deal with ad agencies. They're the lice of the business. and they try.
This is being recorded, right?
Hey, listen, I'm 71. I mean, at this stage of the game, Andrew's going to put me back in the car, give me a popsicle, and he'll drive me back. but the net of it is, we have 45 people that work for us. Not one of them's an ad agency, and I'm not going to allow them to run my business. Just that simple. Second thing is that the least of the people that I have in my office know more than the most of the people that I deal with outside suppliers. And the third thing is, I know that we will provide results for our clients. And there's something else that we do, and I would urge all magazine people to do this. We have a limited inventory that we sell. Once we've sold it, it's done. So we don't have any great incentive to discount. And if somebody comes in with a discounted piece of business, I make them call the client and say, if somebody comes in with a full rate piece of business, you're bumped. So, I forget who it was that had a 30% ad to edit ratio. That's not a bad ratio if you can keep your revenue up, because you're not constantly looking for a piece of business and getting desperate to get it.
Yeah. Now, you told me during our interview, but I don't have the number at the top of my head. How large is Columbia?
Columbia is 115,000 population.
And you're kind of hyper-penetrated.
Yeah, really are. We have a 48% penetration in that market. So it's kind of we're at the top of media audits chart. But, having worked in Chicago for Vance Publishing and then in DC and Pittsburgh for Gannett, I was familiar with the larger markets and having, a bigger circulation. But I think probably it's both good and bad. I prefer the smaller market because it's easier to build affinity with your readership, and it's easier to sort of build off of your brand. I think that you can build a brand and start to leverage that brand for other opportunities in the marketplace that may not be directly tied to selling advertising. So, the downside is that you don't really have the resources to take the kind of risk that I think that you need to take. I was a much better business person when I was taking risk, that I didn't worry about, hey, is this going to make me miss my payroll next week? And so that's the downside. You don't have as deep of pockets, and so you can't be as entrepreneurial as you'd like to be.
And in a way, you've made decisions that made you smaller. I mean, you focused your content in very specific ways.
I think on the editorial side, you know, our beauty business is on the rise dramatically. We don't do beauty edit. It's not indicative to our brand, but we've had to make a conscientious effort to go after those audiences and talk about that we've got that reader who's in that right marketplace for them. I would agree. You know, we have a benefit of tremendous amount of resources. What's been interesting for me in launching this magazine is that we've staffed fairly differently. So the examples that I showed right there are very big expenditures for clients, and they take months to execute and require a lot of collaboration, but they're worth it. And sometimes we'll deal with some agencies. Sometimes we'll deal directly with the client, however they want to do that. Sometimes we deal with creative people at agencies, which is a whole other different, we're very diplomatic at HGTV Magazine. But we have more people in the marketing department than we have in the sales department. And within that marketing department, we have 2 designers and a copywriter. Because for every one of these ideas that we sell, you know, you can't go in with just a presentation. So we've got to go in with something that looks pretty much like that. And a lot of brand managers are very visual. So where we've allocated our resources on the business side has been a tremendous switch. And probably I'm projecting that in 2016, about a quarter of our business will be all advertising that we've created for clients in-house.
Go ahead, Jim.
To answer to kind of big, small question, we've had a lot of big and a lot of small. And I think what's made the difference is when it doesn't matter if it's big or small, other than sometimes there's resource issues. But I think the more important issue is the ability for the operator, whether large or small, to immediately turn on the dime, to be entrepreneurial, even if it's a company the size of Time or Hearst or whatever, or a small company, to recognize that things change regularly, particularly in this crazy business. So I think I mean that's how I would kind of answer that.
I got one more, and then we'll go to the folks who are assembled here. I mean, Naomi said, in sense that, you know, she had a crystal ball. Do you guys have any sort of a crystal ball or a sense of what ink on paper, what Samir would call a magazine, looks like in the next few years? I mean, if you get to 2020, do we still have the same magazine business we have today, or is it substantially different in some way?
I think companies like Hearst and Meredith are doing. My prediction is that that history repeats itself, and I think that if you look at the history of the magazine industry, it was originally the history of the ad agency business. It was originally started by magazine representatives, and I start to see companies like Hearst and Meredith purchasing various aspects of agencies, and I think that's brilliant. And I think that is absolutely where this business is going long term, where you become the owner of a genre. So in other words, you represent.
You own women as an audience?
Yeah, probably smaller. But
if you're American.
yes, and then you surround it and doing what Fred just said, like Hanley Wood does, which is owning the consumer, completely surround the consumer, both with the consumer outreach and also the trade. I think that's where this business is going.
And that would not be limited simply to magazines?
It would have. Oh no, it's the brand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we to that point, you know, we purchased an agency called iCrossing about 6 or 7 years ago, and I think we've sort of finally figured out how to work with that, which is with custom content and native being such an important part of the advertising mix. Why wouldn't you work with an agency that has access to 21 magazine brands and a team of editors and content creators to build that on your behalf? Also the big trend, if you look at the 5 or 6 magazines that we've launched, Dr. Oz, HGTV, Food Network, Oprah, they're all partnerships. So I think you'll see more of magazines being established brands that could play well in print, and they probably won't be 12 times or 10 times. You know, maybe they're 6 times a year, or maybe there's just one big exciting print opportunity that comes in and out. I think we're all getting more flexible, and our ability to execute those. And therefore, it allows us to really take advantage of whatever's going on in culture.
I know you told me that when we were prepping that you're kind of stepping back from the day-to-day, but I know you also have a lot of opinions about where the business is going.
Oh, I don't have any opinions about anything. I think the business is going to change drastically in the next 10 years. And I really respect Hearst. I worked for Hearst for a good many years, represented many of their fine magazines. They're the one set out there that is investing in both digital on a heavy basis, ad agencies, and their people. You see it? I probably couldn't get a job there today. They've gone upside. They're really
Give me your
good
card. Come on up.
But the other thing I see in our business, and the B2B business, is the B2B marketplace is going to get stronger, but the B2B marketplace has to be able to deliver real-time, real good research about what's going on. I mean, I can't go to New Orleans, Louisiana. We're bringing a big meeting down in New Orleans, Louisiana in 2017. You know, I had to know what's going on in that marketplace with the industry. Where do they stand for their numbers in 17, 18, and 19? Do they need us? Is there value for what we bring to the marketplace? Because we, too, are going in for very large checks. Because you don't put a meeting on for 3,500 people for pennies. You know, we're looking at spending $5 to $8 million on these meetings. So we're looking to be able to produce results. That's the first thing. Second thing is the hotel industry that we live in is changing drastically. You read the news lately, a little company called Marriott just bought Starwood. I got a headache that day. Because now I've got a client that represents over 50% of the marketplace. That's a large amount of business, and they're going to be growing and growing. So we have to be able to provide more for them. So we're building our relationships with Hilton. We're building our relationships with Visit Florida. We are constantly building relationships so we can go ahead and build product streams that we continue to work together. But digital, I think, is going to go more and more programmatic. I think there'll be less and less of a digital agency need. I think you're going to be able to call up and get what you want. The big Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all these other people are changing. But there's some openings up. We'll have a marketplace with Airbnb. Airbnb will be coming to our meetings. Resort Quest will be coming to our meetings because they're going to be competing against the hotel community. So even though Marriott now will own 50% of the business, to give you an example, when the Pope went to Philadelphia this year, there were 4,700 rooms that were rented through Airbnb for people to go see the Pope. There were 3,500 rooms in Philadelphia that went empty. So I live in a very dynamic market. And then the other challenge we have, so I think it'll still be out there for us, is that the recession comes in, nobody builds hotels. Nobody. Recession gets to going out, everybody builds hotels. So you can see the pattern. It's going to be going down again, it's going to be coming up again. So it's going to come up, but I think if I was in the major business, for the media business now, I'd be doing it if I had the cash to do what Hearst is doing. They're going the right way.
And Fred, you actually talked about this in your opening remarks about how you're positioning yourself for a variety of things coming down the road, events in particular.
I think we've spent so much of the last 20 years chasing the latest, greatest thing. The newspaper publisher, the magazine publishers that I have talked to at every conference that have spent so much money chasing digital and online, only to really discover that so much of that business is fraudulent and bloated, and it's just, it's not, and it doesn't work, and I think that's what's really, most of the time it doesn't work. So, I hope that the next 5 to 6 years are about getting back to the basics. We're going to become a content-first company, and then we'll just sort of see where the technology goes. It's pretty expensive trying to be the pioneer every time. And so once I see a publisher starting to make money off of one of these online or digital ideas, I will quickly adapt. But I'm going to let someone else spend the money to be the pioneer.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is digital like the carpenter ants of publishing?
Right. I think in some ways they are. So we'll see.
Questions from the audience? Go ahead.
I
Thank you.
and exciting for both the reader to uncover as well as the advertiser.
Mhm.
I want to be a part of it. It was mentioned that the average age for kind of media planner was, almost 25. Are you finding that kind of similar age range with these folks who are requesting kind of this custom content?
Yes and yes. So to your first point, it's a very good point because I have a very collaborative relationship with our founding editor. We both founded it together. Also the first time in my career where I'm older than the editor-in-chief. So she brings a very bright sensibility to it, and we have this expression when we work on these ideas, it has to make sense with an S-E-N-S-E, and it has to make sense with a C-E-N-T-S for me as well, because a lot of work goes into it, and if it's not going to be fun for the reader, then it doesn't pay off for the advertiser as well. So I do see a lot of response from the 24.9-year-old media planner when we bring something very fun to the table. And I have a very big advantage, which is it is a fun brand. And if they don't watch it, their mom watches it, or they've got a friend who does, and they can identify with that. But what I think we're seeing on the agency side, for a while there were print people who were learning how to do digital, and now we see your intro-level media planner really only having a digital background. And then she is put in a position where she has to buy something multimedia, and the nuances of print have never been taught or passed down. So if we can show that magazines have the opportunity to engage as much as whatever disruptive unit you can put on a screen, we can do that a little bit better, and it doesn't go away, and it's there as well too. So a lot of our reality is dealing with the younger audience, but I think the more case studies we have like this, and the more the industry has overall, the more excited we'll get this younger generation of buyer to be about print overall.
Sorry, hand up in the back.
And on your customized ad creative, are you doing that in-house? And if you see the pie bigger for that, are the margins about the same as your run a book, or is it better?
Yeah, so the margins are close to run a book. And we're actually, it's interesting, we can't print everything at Quad because some of these units are very specialized. We did something for Sherwin-Williams Paint last year where they wanted to do something that really showed off finish, not just color, but finish. So we said, wouldn't it be really cool if we did 3 different varnishes? We had a matte and we had a gloss, and it was the same color. Because that's what print can really show you. You can't do that on a screen. We had to send out bids for a special printer just to find that, and I might have originally priced it a little early, and my margin didn't look as great after that as well. So in terms of all the creation, all the design, and all the comp, that's all done in-house. I think our goal, and Hearst is doing a lot of these, there's a lot of these examples throughout a lot of our beauty books as well, is maybe to find more efficiencies going on at Quad, but I probably have more meetings than with other printers than a lot of my colleagues do, simply because we're doing so many more of these. But my boss reminds me about margin quite frequently. So if I can leverage in a nice run a book schedule with it too, then that's a pretty good win-win across the board.
You guys want to weigh in? I know you don't, not necessarily with special units, but just in margin in general.
We have a very good margin.
Show off. That's how you afford those popsicles.
I buy them on credit.
Yeah.
And we have a good margin because we maintain our rates. And that's really, and everybody inside my firm has bought off on that. They get it. And then the clients, and frankly, our competitors make it easy for us because we're the only people of the big 3 that have a marketplace. They've elected not to get into a marketplace. So that's helped us. But the other side of our business with our consumer newspaper inserts, that's a very difficult market. We don't necessarily have the margin in that market, but it gives us a balance in our business. So if something's changing on one, we have a lift on the other.
I think we probably would say too, I think a standard ad sales staff at a Hearst magazine 10, 15 years ago was like 7 or 9 sellers, and now it's 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of margin which is gained by just smaller staffs.
See a hand over here? Go ahead.
I want to ask a question about a subject that has not been discussed either last night or today, and it's the subject of ad blockers. I attended the newspaper convention in Washington Monday and Tuesday of this week. As you all know, our company started as a newspaper company, and one of the most interesting and threatening panels on the convention had to do with ad blockers. Now, I know we're talking about mostly print here, but many magazines in our magazine family all have websites, some of them quite good and some of them good financially. Some of the statistics and the discussion that took place at the newspaper convention in Washington on Monday and Tuesday, it's estimated that about 8 to 10% of the newspaper websites are now adversely affected by ad blockers. Ad blockers are universal. You can get one off of the iTunes store yourself if you want one, or some place else. I would just like to hear the panel discuss a little bit about this threat to a part of our business. Digital is a part of what we do. It doesn't matter whether we publish a newspaper or a magazine. It's an important part of what we do. And this is a relatively new phenomenon that's come on that could be a serious threat to what we do.
Well, imagine, Newt, Fred, you probably are not that affected by it.
Well, Andrew does all of our digital. I brought him to spy on everybody. And he could answer that question better than I can. I don't know.
Well, it's one of the things that we bring up when a marketing director says, hey, I've been instructed by corporate to move half of my budget to digital. And, so we talk about ad blockers, we talk about robots, and it does not affect us, but it's one of the ways that we sell against digital, or so much of the budget moving to digital.
And for us, when we work with HGTV.com, which although that site is owned by Scripps, we do a lot of print digital deals, custom content will become more and more of a desirable thing because there's no real advertising coded in there. And therefore, an ad blocker does not block that out. So, if you look on Refinery 29, or if you look on BuzzFeed, or a lot of those places where, and then you're getting some very interesting ethical FTC separation issues, but I think there's going to be much more of a move towards that type of advertising because it is not so easy to block.
To Mr. Morris's point, it is a huge problem right now that we will overcome. Technology will supersede it, and we'll invent new methods of advertising to counter the ad blockers, who will then invent new ways to prevent it. So you're right to worry about it, but I think it's safe to say that we will circumvent it.
I think the moderator's answer would be that print is the ideal non-ad blocking medium. Well,
every industry though has something happening in it.
it does.
I mean, think about it. If you're in the travel industry today, your nemesis today is the OTAs, the online travel agencies. I mean, they are decimating the revenue that the hotels used to get.
Because they're essentially aggregating room.
What they do is they buy a room from a hotel for say $90 and sell it for 140, and that hotel, is in that box. And once you start getting into that mess, it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah, it's the sneaker phones of the travel business.
Yeah, they are. And they don't pay tax on anything. So, but somebody had their hand up here.
You did. Go ahead.
So Dan, you talked about production coming in and what you guys were doing. How is PubWorks going to affect what you do at Hearst?
Let's see, where's Jim Miller? Right over there. PubWorks, I think, is a great solution in that. And PubWorks is essentially a new company, almost a cooperative, that Hearst and Condé Nast have put together. Jim, you'll correct me if I'm doing that wrong. But in terms of production, layout, design, and eventually a lot of our circulation practices will come into play. So the only real difference, I think, as we've been told, I mean, people are going to be sort of moving around a bit, is that we now, in a way, have become the client. from PubWorks. So I think there is an opportunity for us to save some money and save some resources, which should benefit us on the editorial side. But in terms of where we really, I guess now that especially being in a client situation, is that we can't bring any of these things to market without a lot of collaboration from those publishing partners. The interesting thing will be, as we sort of work it out, is the same person who's going to be laying out HGTV might someday also be laying out Arc Digest. But at the same time, we have a printer who prints all 20 Hearst magazines and gets exposure to a lot of the confidential ideas in business that we do. So trusted partner throughout, two great companies, and I think it's ideally going back to the idea of finding margin within the business. I think that's going to help us focus on the core product.
You've all spoken very eloquently about making money in print from the production side and how to make that work. And we haven't had that much conversation about the people who will be buying, let's just say, the magazine print part of the brand you've been discussing. And I think about two cohorts. One I was supposed to talk about, the millennial generation, but I also think about baby boomers. In both situations, there is a decreasing tendency to want to keep stuff. So if I buy something that's really inexpensive, I don't mind throwing it out. If I buy something that's a bookazine that costs a little more, or a magazine that costs a little more that's through a newsstand, I may think more about, should I just trash it the moment I finish with it? So when I look at people in their 20s, they don't know where they're going to live next year, definitely not 5 years from now, what job they're going to have, and so forth. Even the people who are very sincere readers don't want to keep their books. They want to sell them. They say it's really sad. I dream of bookshelves someday, but they're not keeping books the way they were 20, 30 years ago. Similarly, you look at baby boomers who are moving from their suburban houses in town to a place that's a quarter the size, and they are deaccessioning their books. Now, I don't know where magazines fit into this, but they're certainly not keeping 10 years of National Geographic. They're probably not keeping Southern Living or Name Your Favorite magazine that used to be the sort you'd at least keep for maybe 6 months or a year. Do you see those changing attitudes and lifestyles affecting the purchasing end of making money in print?
Is Hoarders an HGTV?
Yeah, well, Hoarders is not HGTV. And I would say, if anything, where we've increased content, it has been on the shopping side of things. So there's a lot of stuff you can buy. And I think the reason we've been successful is that we're more about buying some really cute pillows or painting something than necessarily doing a full, complete kitchen renovation. Your question is an interesting one, because I think when we all sort of got excited about tablets, one of the benefits of a tablet was you could go back, or you could store. You could have sort of, you could have every, there have only been 37, but you could have 37 issues of HGTV magazine and go back to them. You could cut and paste. There's amazing functionality. We have one of the highest percentages of tablet circulations of any consumer magazine, and that's 8%. So 92% of our readers would much rather have that in ink and paper. At least for the baby boomer group, I can tell you that we do get a lot of, I saved that because I knew I'd be doing my bathroom in a year. So I think that audience, particularly at least in the home space, is doing that. My colleagues at the fashion space will say similar things, which is, I'm saving up for that Gucci purse, so I might save that. So I'm going to think of it more as generation before might have saved, my mother saved every gourmet magazine ever, and there were beautiful binders, and it took up an entire bookshelf. I don't know if people are going to that extent, but I think when I talk to sort of our younger employees, 6 to 8 issues, but again, to your last point, depends on the topic. I think sometimes if it's something that's more news or journalistic, and you miss that issue and you don't get around to it, and then the next one comes, I don't know if you necessarily go back to it.
Are they saving the whole issue, or are they pulling out the page?
It's probably easier to save the whole issue. I would like it if they tore out the ads and went into Home Depot and said, I saw this ad in HGTV magazine. Let me buy this here. I think they save it in its entirety.
I think we have a number of older titles. The American Legion magazine, which is 2.5 million circ. And you're starting to see in this problem that you're saying, what is the job to be done, if you don't mind me saying that again. So you may keep the last, as you said, 12 issues, and then you may archival the rest of them, but then charge a price for it, or have some kind of an incentive, so that although it's not perfect, it is better than simply throwing your magazines out and not having access to them at all. Or you could do what my friend Samir Husney does and start renting storage facilities all over Oxford, Mississippi.
That's right, Newt. I think it's a very good question, because we're going through some of that right now. And my wife is an avid doll collector. If she had to make a decision between the dolls and me, I'd be in trouble. So she threw away all of her gourmets, she threw away all of her Good Housekeeping, she threw everything else. She kept every doll magazine. I am also not an innocent person. I have a large little model railroad collection. And if model trains stopped producing model trains, I'd be very upset. I'd climb back and say, where's my magazines? I have kept all my issues of model trains. Now, the kids can go ahead and throw them away, and they might, but I'm not going to throw them away.
But you haven't moved.
I haven't moved, but we are under a process of getting ready at some point in time to do that. So Leslie has made a decision that she throws something away every day. I thought when I saw the gourmet magazines out there and all the other publications that she had, I knew she was serious, but the dolls weren't touched. So it's what's really near and dear to you. And I think if you have a hobby, you're not going to throw that away. You're going to stick with that. But everything else, I think, it's gone. I agree with you on that.
Time for one more? Go ahead.
I have a question. I feel like in all the discussions we're talking about targeting millennials and targeting the baby boomers. What about that generation between? My generation.
We don't care.
Sorry. I'm just wondering why it's not part of the conversation.
Any thoughts?
We target your generation. All levels of the marketplace are customers for us. And just about every age group has their own meetings that they go to, that they are going to continue to go to. So we have and we see now in our business that women are taking a much bigger role in the process at all age levels.
I think maybe we're taking it for granted because magazines have always owned that 25 to 54 super consumer. And, so now we're talking about millennials and baby boomers because, today's baby boomers, for the most part, have saved and so they're a very desirable demographic. And they have two things that the rest of us don't have. They have time and they have money. And that's very attractive to marketers. The millennials, I think people are kind of excited about that demographic because they don't have children. They don't really have a lot of money, but what money they do have, they spend. And so they have a lot of discretionary income that they're spending on quality of life amenities, and so whether it's a car or music or whatever, home entertainment. But so I think we don't talk much about the 25 to 54 because we feel like we already own them.
Maybe squeeze in one more, Andy.
Yeah, so the average age of the media planner is 24.9. The average age of the modern media executive is shrunk. Since we're talking about selling, I'm sort of wondering, what I've perceived is there's, particularly among print sales organizations, print sales people who've been fighting the good fight, notwithstanding other ways to succeed, but there's kind of a burnout, fatigue, and brain drain of best, brightest young people coming into the field, and thoughts or observations on what we as an industry can do about that to make ourselves a magnet for those best and brightest. We've hired 2 or 3 digital-only sellers and have been just as disappointed within the same context of what you're talking about.
I think the bigger issue with younger sellers is whether or not they're afraid and whether or not they're socially optimistic. Because in the digital space, I found a lot of sellers not socially optimistic at all. Sellers, the best sellers in the world are socially optimistic. They get their head handed to them in a, every day they make a sales call, and what you're looking for is someone that can pick themselves up and then go right back out. We find that a lot of times people that don't have, the problem with print sellers, I think, is that oftentimes they stopped learning to call on the president of the company. They got afraid. And they got some really bad selling habits that they've inherited. I don't think it's the ability, it's selling, it's the bad habit part of it. And I don't know if that answers your question, but when we hire people, we use skill-based testing now. We don't hire anybody without putting them through a battery of tests, looking for social optimism as an example, so that we kind of know what we got when you go in. It's not perfect, but it's a start.
I think it's one of the bigger challenges we're going to have in the next few years, and that's essentially recruiting. And, Devil Wears Prada is an awesome movie, and it's a glamorous business, and people get excited about it. But I think it's not as clear exactly that, if you listen to all of us talk, we're media executives, not necessarily magazine executives. Even though if you come work at HGTV magazine, you're solely responsible for working on this particular print product. However, I think if you're going to be in this business today, your multimedia experience can be as rich as you want it to be. Because if you go in to call on any client, we no longer call on it. Even agencies don't really have print departments so much anymore. So that person you're calling on, she's going to ask you about what are the other opportunities that you can provide. I've been talking with my colleagues, though. I think we have to think very differently about the type of people that we're bringing in and go to a lot of different places as well. We have a lot of people who come out of school, and as a lot of people here will see, people come out of school really want to get a job. So we've got that going for us if we have one to offer. I think our real challenge is I've been selling for 3 years at a magazine brand, and now I have an opportunity to go to Pandora or Snapchat, and I may not be making more, but I feel like I should be doing that now because I feel like that's where the conversation is going, and I don't want to miss out on that. So there are a couple of things that we do. One is we have a nice group of people who have gone and done that, and were really disappointed and came back. And we like to march those people all around the company and talk about what an unfortunate experience that was. Can you send her down? Somebody just resigned. I need her right away. Bring her down and talk to me. But the other thing is to actually have people like me who have worked at a print-based company for a while and have had a multitude of jobs and have taken advantage of a lot of opportunities, and maybe talk more about career in a way. It's a lot of things that Newt talks about in terms of building these relationships. You build a relationship within a company, and you do this for a while. I still think it's the greatest, most fun business there can be. When you get really attached to a brand, you really start to see that. We need a little more evangelizing out there on our behalf.
Right. We never, well, first of all, we can hire out of the hotel industry. It's one of the best places that we get people. We also get people right out of college. And people in the hotel industry are a little different in that they understand what we do, so you don't have to explain it to them. They get the message. They know what it's like to make a budget. They know what it's like to put together a budget. But they don't know what it's like to sell, so we have to teach them how to do that. We've also become much more generous in the way we deploy people. So we had a young woman that worked for us whose parents were sick. She wanted to move back to Houston. That wasn't a problem because we wanted to keep her. And then we had people moving to Chicago. And I can remember very clearly that my son and I were never going to have a regional office anywhere at any time. We got one in Chicago, Reno, Las Vegas, Arizona, Houston, California, and Florida. And if we didn't have those, we wouldn't have a person in California. Same state, they quit. They just quit. You better learn to be resourceful. And my oldest son, I think this is what's really helped us, and I saw this a little bit at Hertz too. When he got out of college, went in the Marine Corps. And the one thing that he drilled out of me and taught me that he learned in the Marine Corps, you don't have to like anybody you work with, but you got to love them. And if you don't, and think what's the best for them. So we've had people come to us and say they're going to these other places. We throw them a party, and wish them
Good
well,
luck.
and say they're welcome, the door's always open. But we never tried to dissuade anybody from leaving.
Maybe to wrap up, I wanted to ask you guys to leave us with one takeaway from the conversation we've had today. Maybe I could start with you, Jim. What do you want people to remember about this panel and about the idea of making money in print?
I think this is, I actually believe in, I believe in something that Bo Sachs said. And that, yeah, can't believe what I said. And he said that we're going into the golden age of print. And he was really referring to the brand. And I think he's right. And within that, this is really an exciting business. I'm an older guy, and I don't want to leave the business at all. I think this is the most exciting time to be in this business that you can be in it. But you have to be very flexible. You have to, and understand that it's really become it's not critical what the platform is. You have to offer lots of things.
What would you say?
I think that sometimes we take for granted just how good we have it with our brand, and it'd be great if we could invest some of the energy that we spend on chasing the latest, greatest technology back into just strengthening our brand and strengthening the relationships that Newt has talked about. So that for me is my takeaway.
And I would say innovation. The things I showed earlier, those things are really exciting, and that's how you build a relationship with a client. Because when the door opens for them once, they're like, all right, what else can you do? What's the next idea? And then you become that go-to person. So, we're encouraged to think really big about magazines. And to your point, making something that's really fun for the advertiser, but fun for the reader as well. So, creativity doesn't have to only live on the editorial side. It can absolutely live on the business side, too.
You get the last word.
I think the thing that I really see is all the exciting young people that are at this convention today. I mean, I'm just so glad to hear people say that I'm a magazine person. Mm-hmm. I'm so sick of hearing people that I'm going to go and do all this esoteric online things that the poor kid doesn't know it's going to be done by a computer in another 2 years. So, and I want to thank you, Doctor, for inviting me, but I want to also thank you for the good job that I saw today in your students. I was very impressed.
Bravo. Bravo.